Good morning and welcome to you all. Hi, Greg. It is with regrets that I am speaking to you from the screen and not in person, but as you all know, we do not control all things in life. And it just happened that a couple of weeks ago, I suffered a minor stroke, which, thanks God, left me still talking and not paralyzed, but I have a problem with maintaining my balance, and as a result, a fall protection expert keeps falling from time to time. With that, I will continue from the sitting position. What I am going to tell you now, actually, it's not a new information, it may be rather a question. I have a project which I am working on. I was asked by one of the Canadian employers who employ several people weighing over 175 kilos, at what weight level they should be assigned from jobs with the hazard of falling to another job. Now that may be related to a drop in their hourly wages. I realize that no government regulation around the world, neither the technical standard, answers that question, and in my opinion, the question is really formulated in a totally wrong way with the wrong attitude. We will not be moving anybody out of the fall hazard jobs. We will provide them with the fall protection equipment suitable for them, and this is totally doable. The only exception will be those who are physically not fit to work at heights with their weight. However, who is to say that they are non-fit? Well, their family doctor. In other words, if they provide a written statement from their family doctor that they can work at an elevation and that they can use the fall arrest system, which, if they do fall, may result in the shock load on that body, but we will keep the shock load within the government limits, meaning in North America 8 kilonewtons and in Europe 6 kilonewtons, then these people are allowed to work at heights, which does not change the fact that we have to supply them with the system that is suitable for them. I recently in my work had 2 cases involving heavy weight people. One of them was a fiber optic splicer, a man who connects from the bundle of 80 fiber optics at one end, has to connect that particular wire with another wire from the other part of the cable, because cable is not infinitely long. He was working, being suspended and seated on the board, which was using 4 slings hanging from the wire that runs from one wood pole to another wood pole, around which the fiber optic cable is wrapped around. The guy was almost 400-pounder, and the safety people noticed that the equipment is usually rated to 310 pounds, at least the standards mentioned that figure, while he was much heavier. What they did was they asked him to lose the weight, and that request didn't work. He was still too heavy. So the company purchased for him loss weight clinic, and he was out of the job for a few months. He lost almost 60 pounds. He returned to his job. There seemed to be no problem, except that within 6 months, he again reached his old weight. Then, thinking that they fulfilled their obligation, they downgraded him from a splicer to a helper working from the ground, and the drop of hourly pay from $30 per hour to $12 per hour. He went to his union and he was fired, and the union filed a civil suit litigation against the employer. I was helping a lawyer, and we were able to prove in court that harnesses rated for 400 pounders were available from most of the manufacturers. It was just a matter of asking about it. I was also able to find out that the men lifts, so-called cherry pickers, which normally are rated up to 350 pounds per bucket, were available with 400 pounds basket. And not only that, that a friend of mine from Florida Power and Light, safety manager, equipped all regions in Florida with one of those cherry pickers with 400-pound bucket, in spite of the cost per cherry picker of around $200,000. In other words, there was a full compliance now with the requirements at the limits, and the Florida Power and Light complied with the regulation issued by OSHA, which required all employers not to punish the workers, but to accommodate. In other words, if they are 400 pounds, provide the equipment which is rated for 400 pounds. If it is beyond the standards, then select that equipment, go to the nearest lab, do the testing, make sure that it's safe for him, and don't try to punish people for something that they are not guilty of. Now, the second case that I have is not that, it's not ending so positively, because a very young, 25 years old guy who was adjusting antennas was asked to climb 200 feet high steel ladder installed around one of the legs of the water tower. And installed on the water tower were plenty of various antennas. The guy started climbing, attached to a fall protection system for steel ladders, and after reaching 70 feet, he shouted to a foreman who was down on the ground, "I can't climb any higher." The lineman advised him by shouting, "So hug the ladder," and started to put on his own harness with the intention to climb to the worker and help him. He was not even finished with putting his harness on when the worker who was supposed to be hugging the ladder fell to the ground. What happened was the fall protection system for ladders failed. In spite of falling such a huge distance, he was still conscious when the ambulance came, and he later on died on the operating table, as doctors said, from the heart attack. However, the investigation after his death showed that major of his internal organs were heavily damaged. So since, at least in North America, we are experiencing the growth of the weight of the population, there will be most likely quite a number of companies interested in this type of a project. And my position is, if a worker who is of a heavy weight can present a written, and I stress, a written statement from his family doctor that he can climb heights and that the shock load of 6 or 8 kilonewtons will not hurt him, then we should assemble the system for that worker instead of punishing him. That's one of the questions that I have for you, which is really, how would you approach that issue of overweight people? 400 pounds or 175 kilograms seems to be really a high weight, but as safety professionals, as fall protection experts, we know that we can assemble a fall arrest system that will be safe for people of very high weight. Okay, another thing that I plan to mention, which is relatively new because it will be shown for the first time during this seminar, are exoskeletons. Exoskeletons are either purely mechanical or mechanical computer-controlled devices which help humans with physical tasks. And 2 or 3 assembly plants in Ford's stable already give workers who are standing on the ground and working on the underbelly of the car above them on the assembly line to strengthen their arms and hands by using an exoskeleton that you will be seeing later on. Now, those exoskeletons were or are really an offshoot of the military developments done under the auspices of DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, which in the United States develops exoskeletons for special forces, people who are usually dropped with the parachute behind the enemy lines, maybe in the mountainous terrain, and their equipment is weighing around 150 pounds, and then they should take a backpack with that equipment and travel another 50 miles climbing and be ready to fight. The DARPA led to the development now already famous DARPA Mule, which is the device with 4 legs, which walks behind the worker and can carry the load. It was tried in the field and the workers didn't like the animal. However, even if kicked or the mule lost the balance and fell on one side, the animal, and I am just joking using the word animal, the animal was able to get himself up and continue walking. We will show it on the appropriate video. So exoskeletons are now another new thing that we will be seeing in fall protection, and we will have to design this system to incorporate these devices. Another special subject are the airbags. Those of you who attended the A+A German Safety Congress several years ago remember most likely the view and the noise of an explosion where a volunteer jumped from the fourth level of scaffolding, and before he even reached the second level, something exploded around his body, making him, let's call it a Michelin boy. In other words, he was surrounded by inflated balloons, which, if he hit the scaffold, protected him against the damage. We thought that this will really change into harnesses with the airbags. Unfortunately, the cost at that time was 2,500 British pounds, and it dropped a little bit, but it is still way too expensive to equip construction workers with that type of harness, knowing that it is the employer who pays for personal protective equipment. However, the airbags found its use for jackets used by horse riders, a little bit richer public, and they are now very popular with another group of people who are motorcycle riders. And I was recently in Toronto in the store selling this type of from the jacket to a complete suit, seeing older people buying those for their grandchildren, not for themselves, for their grandchildren. And how that system operates in practice, you will see on another video. It is a combination of a speed sensor and deceleration sensor and the mini computer that activates the device. So those are not activated if your speed is below 50 kilometers an hour, but if you happen to fall, it will be inflated before the motorcyclist hits the road. Well, that's perhaps all that I wanted to tell you at this time. Greg, who will be filling in for me during the seminar, is familiar with my part of the project. I would say more than familiar, and I am 100% sure that I am leaving you in the good hands, and perhaps we will be seeing each other at the very last day on Friday during question and answers period. Thank you very much for your attention.